Hi, good morning and welcome. My name is Caitlin Sampson and I'm at Juniper. I'm in Juniper's Service Provider Field Marketing Group. I'd like to welcome you today to the fourth webinar in the series that we've been putting on. This topic is on SD-WAN. Wanted to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. I want to recommend that you use Chrome as your browser today. So if you are logged in through another browser, if you want to just pop out and pop back in, you can keep your audio the same. That will definitely help with your viewing today. If you're using Firefox, it is also works well, but we definitely recommend Chrome as the browser for viewing in this console today. Also wanted to let you know that on the left side of your screen on the bottom are some resources for you to view after the webinar. Some resources that are good to take a look at. And then on the right side, we have some speaker bios that'll introduce you to the speakers that we have on the presentation today. Our presentation is being recorded and will be available shortly after the webinar. So hopefully you'll be able to take a look at that or recommend it to colleagues as well. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to John Orby, who is the Senior Director of Sales at Juniper Networks, to get us started. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Caitlin. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today. Again, the focus is on SD-WAN, specifically simplifying your enterprise customers' digital transformation. As Caitlin said, my name is John Orby. I focus on the U.S. market in business development. I'm based in, the airport code is STL. I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. And I'll introduce the speakers for today's session. And again, thank you for joining. I'm actually going to introduce them in reverse order that you'll actually hear them today. First up, Steve Veneman. Steve is based in New Hampshire, and he's been with Juniper for a number of years. He's the Director of Product Marketing, focused on our managed service solutions at Juniper and the Service Provider Group. He's been in the communication industry for over 20 years, primarily focusing on design, development, marketing, and sale of infrastructure equipment, optical semiconductors, embedded operating systems, network systems, and internet network solutions. Beyond the team here at Juniper, I'm excited to welcome two colleagues and two gentlemen from STL Partners. The firm is based in London. They focus on many verticals, but they have a particular interest in the telecom industry. They're committed to telecoms. They're subject matter experts, focused at the forefront of industry developments, continuously working with clients to anticipate new opportunities and threats. So we're very enthusiastic that they're here today to help us understand what's going on in the sector. We'll be joined by Matt Pooley. Matt's a senior consultant with STL Partners. He's based in London. He's worked with telecoms and their partners to extract value from new technology. He's worked with organizations worldwide, specifically on network function virtualization and SDN implementations, particularly SD-WAN. So a very good content and background for today's discussion. He's had an emphasis on practical tools and insights to help service providers understand and overcome barriers to adoption, as well as take on new enterprise managed services to the market. His other focus areas include telco digitalization, transformation, and simplification, as well as developing effective responses to emerging technologies such as 5G, artificial intelligence, and blockchain. And our first presenter from STL Partners is David Martin. David is an associate senior analyst with STL, and he's based in Cambridge, England. David publishes extensive research on network function virtualization and SDN and managed services market, as well as broader themes such as vendor strategies and the Internet of Things. He's responsible for STL Partners' NFV development tracker and most comprehensive database of live telco deployments of virtualized technologies, including SD-WAN. David is a telecoms analyst of nearly 20 years. In addition to STL Partners, has worked with Ovum and Alyssa Mason. So without further ado, let me turn over to David to start us off. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, John, for the introduction. So I'm David Martin, and I'm going to take you through some general sort of data that STL has gathered on the NFV and SDN markets, and in particular SD-WAN, as part of one of the services that I manage and produce for STL Partners, our NFV deployment tracker. And as John was sort of saying, we think it's the most comprehensive source on publicly available information on live commercial deployments of NFV and SDN worldwide. That's to say NFV and SDN in live production networks. So looking beyond the POCs and the testing to live production services. So I'm going to sort of go through some very general slides and then drill down a bit further to the SD-WAN data. So NFV SDN has indeed been a long predicted trend that has taken some time to kind of get going. So this is the chart that you see here is our overall data on the number of live commercial NFV and SDN deployments. We restrict our analysis to tier ones, and there are about 96 tier one operators that we have discovered deployments by. The source of the information is public domain in the large part, but also, so that would be from press releases and by vendors and operators and reports in reputable media, but also based on some of the confidential conversations we have with operators, in which case that forms part of the aggregate overall data set, but we don't provide detailed information on those deployments, obviously. So here, I'll just sort of point out that these are not cumulative deployments. These are the deployments that we have monitored on a year-by-year basis. So obviously the cumulative deployments are considerably higher than those numbers. We have about 350 deployments worldwide in our database. And as you see, momentum is going. SDN NFV is becoming a reality. And the pending deployments that you see in the last chart there are deployments that we expect to be completed in 2018. So they've already been announced, they're already in the public domain, but they're not yet powering live services for the main part. But we expect those to be live by 2018. So obviously the 2018 data is only for the part year up until June. So clearly the end of year total is going to be considerably higher. So you can see that there is quite a bit of growth momentum getting going in the market. Just one little question of definition. How do we define a deployment? A deployment we define as the whole set of all of the NFV and SDN elements that support a live service. So, for example, there may be a virtualization of a mobile core network, and we'd look at all of the elements that were mentioned there as part of the deployments, such as the IP multimedia subsystem components or the evolved packet core elements, but also any SDN or NFV infrastructure elements. And we'd count all of those separately as components of a deployment, but we'd say that they were one deployment. So in fact, the actual number of actual components and VNFs tracked in our database is now around about 720. So obviously greater than the total for the deployments shown there. Now on the next slide, which I shall jump to, we look here at the breakdown of those total deployment figures by the main focus of those deployments. So SD-WAN, which is the second line there on that chart, clearly has gathered some considerable momentum, particularly over the last 2 years there. 2017 was arguably the breakthrough year for telcos deploying SD-WAN. So this obviously relates to telcos rather than SD-WAN providers themselves targeting enterprise customers. So telcos really started to adopt SD-WAN in a significant way, and in fact it probably is the NFV and SDN-based service that has gained the most traction in terms of commercial deployments. Other sort of functions there, you see core network functions, and that's the kind of thing that I was referring to, like the IMS or the EPC. SDN sort of speaks for itself. VNF-based services would be the kind of things that would be either in the cloud or the customer premises, enterprise networking functions such as routers and firewalls and WAN optimization and the like. NFEI would be the compute, virtualized and physical compute infrastructure and the operating systems for the cloud infrastructure. Just another sort of note, so these data here look at what we have decided to be the principal governing element of those deployments. So we count as an SD-WAN deployment here where all of the elements that might be wrapped up into a deployment are essentially designed to offer a commercial SD-WAN service. Whereas SDN, we would say, well, a lot of SD-WAN obviously is based on SDN, but if we count as an SDN deployment where the principal emphasis is maybe to build out an SDN architecture that will power multiple live commercial services or perhaps a network-on-demand type service offering rather than, in the first instance, an SD-WAN. So that's how we kind of cut and slice the market there. So SD-WAN is really gathering momentum, and the next slide looks at the regional breakdown of that. So North America is leading the world in terms of SD-WAN deployments. Now, bear in mind this is Tier 1 operators. This is not the total sum of all SD-WAN in the marketplace. This is Tier 1 players. So we've already see that there are 25 deployments of SD-WAN now live in the marketplace in North America. But other regions are fast catching up. So Asia-Pacific is in second place, and there was a big surge of SD-WAN deployments in Asia-Pacific last year. Just as a sort of footnote, which we might be able to come back to, this year the pace of deployment in Asia-Pacific has slowed down considerably. There have only been about 3 live deployments so far in the year to date. And we believe that sort of relates to particular market circumstances for that region. But in North America, as we've seen, and in Europe, the pace of SD-WAN deployments is still, still growing, if anything. And there's very little elsewhere in the world. So the only other regional market we've recorded any SD-WAN deployments is in the Middle East. Nothing in Latin America or in Africa. So in the next slide, to summarize the principal benefits and USPs of SD-WAN, we see it as a clear sort of no-brainer, a more flexible and cost-effective upgrade to existing WAN solutions. Obviously, wide area networking has been around for a very long time, mostly now based on Ethernet and IP MPLS technologies. Very resilient, well-established technology for connecting networks separated by geography and for enabling enterprises to relay data between employees and locations. Now, SD-WAN builds on all of that. It's an extension and an upgrade to WAN, but something that allows the WAN to be controlled much more flexibly, to introduce policy-based management, application-specific prioritization of traffic, and a lot of very obvious operational benefits. So a software-based controller taking over from the more inflexible hardware-based control systems. It works over relatively cheap IP connections, broadband access, and public internet, so there's no need for hubs, and those can be very easily integrated with the existing IP MPLS infrastructure. It can use multi-purpose hardware that you can then load up other functions to, or even other SD-WAN platforms, rather than a single-purpose dedicated hardware that is difficult to upgrade or evolve. And changes and upgrades can be effected remotely, which eliminates the need for very many truck rollouts and engineers to come and configure things manually. The only slight question mark, and I think that's something that we would probably address later on, is that SD-WAN suites do need to incorporate strong sort of security. Some of the sort of over-the-top platforms that initially were prevalent in the marketplace were perhaps not quite as rigorous on the security element as were the sort of closed loops architecture and rigorous security functions of the IP MPLS networks. So security is something that definitely needs to be addressed as part of SD-WAN solutions. So I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Matt, who will take us forward.
Great. Well, thanks, David. I think you've given a really good overview there of how SD-WAN has been growing and why that is. But obviously, there is still room, I think, for a lot of operators to consider SD-WAN and to deploy it who have not done so already. So this is a point where we wanted to sort of turn it over to you, the audience, to ask a poll question, which is very simple. Has your organization launched SD-WAN? And that should be popping up on your console. Now there's 4 options, which will give you sort of 30 seconds to click the one that's relevant to you, and we'll have the results. So the options are, no, we haven't launched SD-WAN yet, and currently we're not really planning to, or we haven't, but in the longer term, a bit further out, it's definitely something that that's inevitable to happen, or we haven't, but it's coming very soon, the third, or we've deployed it, it's live, we've got customers on board, we're running with it. We think it'd be very useful from our point of view to really understand, how you as an audience fit in the SD-WAN journey at the moment. So I'll just give you a few seconds to answer that, and then we'll click on, we should be able to have a look at the results. Great, okay. Well, clicking on, we can see, wow, surprisingly, actually not what I expected, a real mix of responses here. People that have got SD-WAN out there, live, deployed, customers on board, but people that are really sort of a lot earlier on in their journey, who are probably still trying to figure out how they should go about delivering SD-WAN, where they should get it from, who should they work with on that. I think we do a lot of work with the telcos, with the operators who ask us very similar questions to the ones that I just raised. So, where should we be getting our SD-WAN from? Who should we be working with in order to do so? How should we be delivering it? What equipment do we need? And so on and so forth. And we wanted to just cover some of what we've seen over the next few slides. Now, in terms of supply, so where you get the SD-WAN from, we see 3 primary models based on David's data and the conversations we've had for supplying telco SD-WAN. So the first is the kind of the most obvious, if you like. It's vendor supplied, so it's working with a single provider, the likes of Juniper or others, to build a solution that's tightly integrated with your operator's existing infrastructure. Alternatively, we have seen others take a more kind of DIY approach, what we call facilities-based, so self-developing their own SD-WAN, or at least an SD-WAN type service, more or less the same thing, that they deliver end-to-end themselves without the vendor's help. Others, again, have taken a more hybrid approach, what we call the multi-provider approach, combining solutions from different providers in order to meet varying requirements of different customers or different needs for different things. Now, we don't necessarily see one or another of these as the correct option. It depends very much on the telco, on your customers, on many other factors. But we have seen that most traction has been with that first one, with the sort of more traditional vendor-supplied approach. We appreciate why that is. Many people want something that works more or less off the shelf and can be trusted, and that option represents that. That said, another factor that might influence who you decide to work with, where you decide to get your SD-WAN from, is how you plan to take the solution, deliver the solution to your enterprise customer. So again, we see 3 kind of primary modes of delivery for the different SD-WAN solutions that are out there live now. So the first is a very sort of traditional way of delivering managed service to enterprises. It involves a dedicated appliance for SD-WAN, so that's to say equipment on the customer premises, the CPE, that is specifically designed to provide SD-WAN, and also any associated security functions that might be needed to go along with that. And this is what many people are kind of offering off the shelf, if you like. Now, alternatively to that, it's possible to use more generic hardware on the customer premises and run the SD-WAN on that generic hardware as a software service. So the CPE is kind of more generic. You're running SD-WAN as software, and you can configure that, play with that, tweak that from afar over the internet. That's what we call kind of universal CPE, UCPE. Alternatively, if you're running it as software, some people have said, well, we may as well run that in the cloud and just place a very simple piece of networking equipment on the customer's premises to interface between the two, so a router or something like that. That's what we call virtual CPE, vCPE. Now, all three of these models work. All of them have been used, particularly the first one. And all of them are valid and for different reasons and for different people. That said, we do, based on our, on our work with operators, have a preferred approach or a way of doing this that we kind of recommend as a starting point in your thinking when you're going on your SD-WAN journey. So if you think about the fact that most people have taken this first option in terms of the dedicated SD-WAN appliance, the reason we think that's happened is because it's what you might call a point solution. It's something that's available almost off the shelf readily in various different forms from vendors, from companies out there. That means it's relatively easy to roll out quickly. It's proven that it works. You know that it's going to do what you want it to because it has done so for many other customers out there. However, taking this kind of point solution approach throws up some problems when you start to look at changing the services on offer. So to begin with, when you want to change things or offer a flavor of SD-WAN that isn't possible with the dedicated CPE rolled out, you have to consider, often forced to replace that, which means both paying to the new CPE and the cost of the truck rolls to get it replaced, get it installed on the customer side. And basically, in essence, you become shackled into the constraints of whatever your chosen vendor chooses to or can provide to you. Now, with this in mind, if you really want a sort of more flexible future-proof solution, it's worth considering using one of the two generic hardware options. This is what we call the kind of platform solution. So it means rolling out generic hardware to the customer premises. In this illustration, I've got UCPE, but it could be VCPE if that's appropriate. And then running SD-WAN and any associated security functions on it as a software service. So it's a small distinction, but an important one. Because UCPE, VCPE can be administered from afar, it's much easier to change up the flavor of SD-WAN for individual customers without having to replace the equipment on site. It means more flexibility. It means less costs for you and also for the enterprise customer, which is important. If you choose the right hardware, you may also be able to accommodate other functions or services beyond just SD-WAN in one single box. So this might be some of the things David mentioned earlier, things like unified comms, WAN optimization, firewalls, or potentially even VNF-based services that haven't been dreamed up yet, without necessarily being locked into using one particular vendor. So in this case, in essence, you're not really selling SD-WAN. Well, that is to say you are, but you're using SD-WAN as a kind of gateway, a way to introduce your enterprise customers to a wider world of possibilities around virtual managed services that they can purchase from you on a common platform. So once the generic CPE is installed on their premises, you and they have the flexibility to offer or try new things quickly, a lot more cheaply than before. And therefore, it represents a much better return on investment, both for you, the operator, and for the enterprise customer itself, once you've got over the initial costs of rolling out the UCPE or VCPE. So lots of positives about that. Of course, to implement an approach like this, it's not as straightforward, perhaps, as buying the point solution. You need to be working with a vendor that can help you support it and help you, transition the way that both you and your customers work to do it properly. Now, it would be at this point that I'm going to hand over to Stephen, who's going to explain why he believes Juniper can do this and fits in very well there. So over to you, Stephen.
All right, thank you, Matt. And with that, as Matt stated, I'll walk you through our Contrail SD-WAN solution, along with Juniper's perspective on the overall enterprise market, how SD-WAN fits into this, and then additionally where we see, both from a vision as well as our objective in terms of where the industry is heading and how service providers such as yourselves can be helping your enterprise customers to achieve their business goals and objectives. So with that, as David and Matt discussed, enterprise organizations are focused on digital transformation, and therefore our objective is to enable you, our service provider customers, to deliver a portfolio of services that enable your customers to transform their wide area networks and also their branch and local area networks such that you're supporting them in achieving their longer-term business and financial goals. And with that, we've developed this 5-step approach to help you have a conversation with your customers regarding where they are in their journey and to help them see a vision for a fully automated next-generation software-defined branch. So as we walk through these steps, you'll see an evolutionary path starting from step 1, which is where many, well, I'll say some service providers still are today, but most were as little as 3 to 4 years ago, which was effectively just providing basic connectivity services, which perhaps a managed router offering or a managed security offering along with that. And as the industry's evolved, we've seen the evolution to what is most commonly referred to as hybrid WAN, which leverages SDN and NFV technology to start automating the deployment, provisioning, and management of the branch connectivity. And Matt covered that in his slides just a couple of minutes ago. And this is a logical next step from basic connectivity towards SD-WAN, as hybrid WAN provides that ability to start integrating in various different types of WAN connectivity options and also enables the service provider to start automating deployment. So with that, we then move along to SD-WAN with security, and this is what most people are referring to when they refer to SD-WAN today. And some of the key capabilities that are provided in any SD-WAN solution are the ability to support multiple different connectivity options, the ability to route applications across multiple different WAN connections in a dynamic fashion, to simplify the connectivity and the complexity associated with WAN and branch network management. And that's typically done through the use of graphical user interface tools that centralize provisioning and management of the SD-WAN environment, as well as providing performance monitoring, analytics, and reporting tools. And while most SD-WAN solutions provide IPsec VPN support to secure internet traffic across the WAN and NAT for local internet breakout, Juniper's SD-WAN solution in this case is fully integrated with our SRX next generation firewall solution, which helps to protect both the LAN and the WAN, and that's why we refer to this stage as SD-WAN with security. And then as we move on to step 4 with SD-WAN deployed, as Matt talked about, this now gives you an opportunity to start integrating in, depending on the vendor that you select and the approach that you took. We think this is a critical next step, is what we refer to as SD-WAN with NFV, which is in working with an open platform and an open solution, you have the ability to integrate additional services into your portfolio. And in the case of Juniper's SD-WAN solution, you're able to integrate VNFs that could be provided by other vendors, such as Juniper or our competitors. You can also create your own VNFs that could be deployed as a service, or you can integrate enterprise applications that your particular customer might need to be running out at their branch locations, and with that you can do that integration and provide that as a service to them over the top of their SD-WAN solution. So with that, the VNFs are typically run, as Matt stated, on a universal CPE device. Those could actually be then deployed out at the customer premise, obviously, so the VNFs would be out at the customer prem. Or they could also, again, depending on the versatility of the SD-WAN solution, your better solutions will allow you to run those VNFs both out at the customer prem or up in your own data center or in your POP sites on a server blade or a server in a rack. The benefits of the SD-WAN with the NFV approach are that it helps simplify network operations for yourself and your enterprise customers, and it results in the customer having one set of management and monitoring tools for all of their WAN edge services. And this then sets you up for what we refer to as Step 5, or the converged next generation software-defined branch. In achieving this final step in the journey, you'll find that you've fully automated your WAN, your customer's WAN edge at this point, and the branch LAN for your enterprise customers. And additionally, most, if not all, of your enterprise customers' corporate network functions will now have been virtualized, and you'll be offering them a broad portfolio of managed services that include things like managed SD-WAN, managed LAN, Wi-Fi, security, unified communications, and many others. And as I said, in having previously achieved Step 4, these services are now fully automated and integrated into a common platform that provides for the deployment, monitoring, and management of the various classes of service, the policies that are associated with those services, and the parameters associated with the SLAs, either at a network level or an application level. So with that, I'll pause here again for another poll question, just to reach out and get a sense of, if you look beyond SD-WAN, what do you see as the next service that you would deploy in your network? And I'll just leave you a couple of minutes or a few seconds, better yet, to respond to this particular poll question. Okay, so looking at the responses, we see 50% at security, and then 50% at other. And Matt, David, I'll open it up to you also, just to see if this aligns with your expectation and what you're seeing out there in the market.
Yeah, I mean, I think go ahead, David.
Yeah, I mean, security is definitely a major sort of focus, I think, at the moment, so that's not surprising at all. A lot of the SD-WAN players are definitely upping their game as far as security is concerned, so it doesn't surprise me that that's flagged up as an area. There was a recent poll, I think it was a light reading poll, about that sort of indicated that quite a lot of the respondents, obviously they're drawn from a very wide range of industry participants. I think over half of the respondents seem to be saying that security was an issue that still needed to be resolved as far as encouraging further SD-WAN take-up. So that does sort of match with my expectations, actually.
Yeah, exactly what I was going to say myself. When we speak to people, they always say, "But yes, can we trust it? Is it secure?" That's in the top 3 things that any enterprise is asking us. So I can see why people are taking it so seriously.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, and interestingly, this makes a nice lead-in to our next slide, because as we look towards providing those additional services with SD-WAN, we can see here on the right side of the slide that security is often the top service sold after SD-WAN. So definitely agree with both of you, as well as apparently half of our audience. So with that, a couple of other key points on this slide. As we discussed in our 5-step approach, SD-WAN provides an opportunity for service providers to better engage their enterprise customers and meet their needs for increased flexibility and agility in their connectivity options. But it also allows the service provider to maintain relevance by not just selling them the connectivity, but also to upsell additional services that add more value on top of that connectivity that they're already providing. And Matt, as you described and discussed, by leveraging a universal CPE device with your SD-WAN solution, our customers will be able to introduce new services and expand their current service portfolio. And through a number of conversations that we've had with customers and analysts, such as yourselves, as we talked about, the most common service to be purchased after SD-WAN is security, but we're also seeing services such as WAN optimization, managed Wi-Fi, We've had requests for IoT gateway support out on the universal CPE device, unified communications, session border controllers, and a few others. But the key thing here is that by deploying SD-WAN in the enterprise customer's network, the service provider is able to create a beachhead that increases the stickiness of their connectivity services and also provides the ability to generate more revenue in the future. And because of that, we like to refer to, when we have these conversations with our SD-WAN or with our service provider customers about SD-WAN, we like to talk about it in the context of business outcomes. And Matt, as you stated, a fully integrated, open, and secure SD-WAN solution can help service providers achieve a number of business outcomes. And one of them is to improve margins. And not all SD-WAN solutions are equal in this way, in that not all of them are able to be fully integrated into the network. Some of the solutions in the market work predominantly just over the top. They look a bit like a black box. And that means that the service provider isn't really able to enhance or differentiate their service if they use those types of environments. But by deploying an open, secure, and fully integrated solution, the service provider is able to better compete against the over-the-top players or competitors, because in some cases those over-the-top players offer a managed SD-WAN as a service play as well. So by having a fully integrated solution that's open and customizable, it's often more attractive from a margins perspective, as well as providing key differentiation against some of those white-labeled over-the-top offerings. Also, by deploying a solution that has a fully integrated next-gen firewall security capability, service providers are able to deliver not just SD-WAN, and not just a secure SD-WAN solution, but also a portfolio of security services. So in many cases, the next-gen firewall brings with it advanced security capabilities that can then enable the service provider to sell tiered security services from basic through advanced and on to premier, along with SD-WAN. Additionally, choosing the right SD-WAN solution can help the service provider to generate new revenue through a portfolio of managed services, as we talked about in the 5-step model, by helping them to integrate additional VNFs through an open approach which leverages industry standard APIs, protocols, and templates. And as we talked about with the customization, it's important for the service provider to be able to differentiate their SD-WAN solution from the other service provider offers, but as well as those over-the-top competitors who are getting into the managed services space through cloud-based solutions. And with that, we believe that our SD-WAN solution can also help service providers to expand their target market. So being able to leverage SD-WAN to touch customers both in region and out of region, and also to address, because of the broad portfolio of CPE devices that we support, we can also help the service provider to sell SD-WAN into industry-specific applications such as the financial or government sector, where the CPE device has to be certified for those use cases. And as we'll see on the next couple of slides, the Juniper solution is already fully integrated with our SRX platform that's been certified in most government agencies and large financial institutions. So with that, as we move along and take a look at the Contrail SD-WAN solution itself, Juniper Networks Contrail SD-WAN is designed to simplify, automate, and secure connectivity between the enterprise branch, corporate, and cloud sites. As we've discussed earlier, it supports multiple options for connecting enterprise locations to each other and to the multiple clouds that they leverage for business tools, processes, and resources. It provides application quality of assurance to ensure a positive user experience for both internal employees and end customers that are on the enterprise network. It simplifies the deployment and management of WAN endpoints and the wide area network itself through a centralized SD-WAN controller that leverages GUI interfaces for provisioning, managing, and reporting. And it is secure, leveraging next-gen firewall at all of its endpoints. The components of Contrail SD-WAN include our Contrail Service Orchestration solution, which is the Contrail SD-WAN controller. We have a broad portfolio, as you can see on the left side of the slide, of customer premise devices, which include universal CPE platforms being the NFX, traditional CPE being the branch SRX, and virtual CPE endpoint devices. Service providers can also leverage their existing network infrastructure, whether that's the Juniper MX or SRX, in their network to integrate that into the environment to provide additional enhanced features and capabilities. And with that, some of the key differentiators or capabilities of Contrail SD-WAN, we've talked a lot about security, but we do feel that security needs to be a fully integrated aspect of any good SD-WAN solution, not just a bolt-on. So with that, our Juniper Contrail SD-WAN solution, all of the endpoints are fully integrated with our Juniper SRX platform software. And in addition to that, we fully integrated our advanced security capabilities such as our IDS, IPS, Unified Threat Management, and Advanced Threat Protection solutions. Also, just a quick highlight on the NFX. Our NFX hardware, unlike some of the other white box solutions out there, does include a TPM chip along with security features such as Secure Boot and Secure BIOS to make sure that the environment is fully trusted and secure all the way down to the endpoint hardware. And we've talked a little bit about the CPE portfolio. Juniper Contrail SD-WAN does have a broad portfolio of CPE options, the NFX being one of the most widely adopted universal CPE solutions in the market. We have a couple of different versions of that now. The NFX 150, which is a smaller platform, and the 250, which is our larger platform. We also have a virtual solution, being the virtual SRX, which runs as a VNF and can be deployed on the NFX or in a server or on a server in a data center or a cloud environment. And as I mentioned earlier, we support the branch SRX 300 as well as endpoints. So with that, we do have the ability to scale from very small environments all the way up to the most rigorous or demanding environments. And also to point out, important to point out that our solution is fully integrated, both hardware and software, with only one vendor to manage. And I'll just touch briefly upon the flexibility of our solution. As Matt talked about earlier with regards to the importance of having an open environment, Contrail SD-WAN is open, it's standards-based, and can be fully integrated with your existing network infrastructure. As we talked about earlier, it is an open box as opposed to a black box. And we have probably some of the broadest support when it comes to open APIs and the use of industry standard protocols to make it easier to integrate into your environment, including your existing MPLS and IPVPN networks. And as we talked about earlier, the APIs enable you as a service provider to integrate third-party VNFs into the SD-WAN environment, which could be provided by Juniper or other network vendors. They could be provided by yourself or by your end customers, which you integrate in as a service. One other key point with regards to flexibility is that we do offer also what they call second stage configuration templates, which means that the SD-WAN solution itself is able to be customized. So if there's a specific feature or capability that you want to integrate into the environment to differentiate your SD-WAN solution from that of the competition, as long as it's supported by the endpoint devices in our Junos operating system, you can actually create a little script or an application that you would run post deployment of the solution in the network. And you could do that either specifically for a particular customer need, or you could do it to differentiate your service more broadly. And then finally on this slide, we do refer to our solution as carrier grade, and we mean that from a number of perspectives, but perhaps the most important is its built-in redundancy and reliability. The clustering capability of the SD-WAN controller provides redundancy across the control plane, which includes geographic redundancy, as the controllers can be dispersed across a couple of different data centers in different regions. Also, our solution is horizontally scalable, such that you can add additional servers to scale out the platform. It's multi-tenant, allowing you to service or provide services to multiple customers off of one instance. And it provides both hub and spoke as well as endpoint redundancy as well. So I'll move through these last few slides fairly quickly because I'm just mindful of time, and I know we want to get to Q&A. So from a business outcome perspective, as we talked about in the business outcome slide, with all of these capabilities in place, we've been able to help a number of our customers to achieve their desired business outcomes, enabling them to increase the value of their connectivity services by providing greater flexibility and agility in the connectivity options that they provide their customers. And then also, as you'll see on this slide, in some cases, we've already started helping these service providers to upsell additional services in addition to SD-WAN on top of their SD-WAN solution. And just a quick plug about our SD-WAN solution. We recently were selected by CRN. Our Contrail SD-WAN solution was identified as one of the top 10 best SDN solutions of 2018. And if you're still thinking about why Juniper for SD-WAN, just emphasize that Juniper is ranked in the top vendor or as a top vendor in multiple categories by outside analysts. And as we wrap up, we'll point out that we do encourage you to check out these additional resources. You'll be able to find these in the resource section of the webinar app, which you can find in the bottom of your viewer screen. I understand through one of the questions that I think the contact information may be pre-populated in that, so feel free to either change that by putting your own information in, and then also we'll be sending out these links through email to all of you that have participated in the webinar over the upcoming days. So in summary, with Juniper's Contrail SD-WAN, we do believe that as a service provider, you can leverage SD-WAN to simplify your customers' WAN environments and enable their transition towards a next-generation software-defined branch. We also feel that you'll be able to leverage SD-WAN to deliver a broad portfolio of cloud-based solutions, whether on-net to customers that are located either on-net or off. You'll be able to leverage SD-WAN to boost your managed services revenue with an SD-WAN plus services approach. And I'll just reemphasize that importance as you look out into the industry for vendors for SD-WAN solutions. Make sure that you're working with somebody who has an SD-WAN solution with fully integrated security that isn't necessarily treating security as a bolt-on or an afterthought to the platform. And then also with that, the importance of making sure that you're working with a vendor that's going to be able to help you differentiate yourself in the market. So with that, I'll stop here and we can transition over to the Q&A. So David, let me get started with you. I know you had mentioned earlier in the presentation that the SD-WAN deployments have slowed down in Asia. I was just wondering if you could share with the audience why that is.
Yes, sure. Well, in our view, there's a number of factors that are specific to the Asia-Pacific region at play there. One of them is that some of the more developed markets in that region may sort of already be reaching a bit of saturation as far as SD-WAN supply is concerned. Some of the leading telcos like NTT in Japan, Telstra in Australia, China Telecom, have in fact adopted the sort of multi-provider approach that we've taken and have substantial portfolios with multiple SD-WAN providers, and to some extent may already have collared a significant portion of the market share that's available to target there. But also one other sort of problem, really the opposite of that, is that in the more developing markets, they're extremely difficult to make out the business case for SD-WAN, primarily because of an absence of competitive broadband access supply, whether fixed or mobile. So there simply isn't really the sort of infrastructure build-out and quality of broadband access infrastructure that would enable SD-WAN to fly in those markets. So there's been nothing in India and nothing in some of the other very populous developing markets there. And a third factor, I would say, is that the service providers in Asia Pacific have been extremely adept at developing some innovative SDN-based solutions that, in some senses, provide a kind of alternative to third-party SD-WAN solutions. One example I could just sort of throw out quickly is that SK Telecom in South Korea hasn't deployed SD-WAN, but it does have a number of advanced SDN-based solutions that offer, much of that sort of functionality, perhaps even in a more fine-grained and manner, which has sort of built-in security there. So I think there are sort of a number of conflicting factors there that are making SD-WAN difficult to take on. But there's still plenty of opportunity there if the right kind of formula is made available for some of the more developing markets, I think.
All right, good. And with that, I'll also open this next question, David and Matt, up to the two of you first, and then I can weigh in from our perspective. But we had a question from Michael Cooper about whether or not we can, how do we define the size of the branch office? Is it 10 people, 100 people, 500 or 1,000, et cetera? So just maybe from your perspective, do you put any limits on the size of the branch, both at a low end or a high end? And how would you define branch in your research? And then I'm happy to weigh in as well.
I mean, I think for us it is generally a case of, how long is a piece of string? I think it's very much defined really to us by the suppliers. The way that people are talking about this, I think, differs depending on which supplier you're talking to. So actually, from my point of view, I'd be interested to hear, how you're defining it, Stephen, when you're talking about it.
Yeah, fair point. And I will share. I like your response of how long is a piece of string. I think that does somewhat fit well into it. But and it's hard, obviously, with these Q&As to know the true intent of the question, but I can share from a Juniper perspective, we have seen customers who are a single site that, because of the nature of their business and because of the fact that they're in the process of transitioning so many of their applications to cloud-based solutions, that they're looking for something like SD-WAN to help better set traffic policy for application-based traffic, right? So one of the key benefits of SD-WAN is that app QoE support and the ability to ensure that business-critical applications take priority over other non-business-critical applications. So in some cases, it could be a branch, that could be the entire enterprise, right? But we also, to your point, when we think about branch, branch could be a very small office in a remote location where the benefit of SD-WAN is that, maybe it's just basic internet access that they have going into that site because there aren't a lot of connectivity options in that location. And a branch could also be, a several hundred employee site where they're in a metropolitan area and they have a number of different connection options going in and out of it. So I do think it is as an industry term, it is used very broadly, and it can mean a number of different things.
I suppose that the key thing from our perspective is that it's flexible, right? What you were saying, that it could be a very, very small site, it could be a couple of people very remotely, it could be an extremely large, what you might call a campus site. But the point of it is the solution is designed to work in many very different situations.
That's right, exactly. And with that, another thing that I'll point out is as enterprises are evolving or transitioning to SD-WAN, we've also emphasized that it's important to pick a solution such as Juniper's that can support them through the transition. And what I mean by that is, very few, especially larger enterprises, are going to upgrade all of their branches at once. So there will be some branches that are going to be on the legacy connectivity service or more of a hybrid WAN solution for a period of time until they can get upgraded to the full SD-WAN environment. So with that, you want to make sure that you have a vendor who can support that transition and what we would refer to, not to confuse the term, but a hybrid environment right? One where you have some endpoints that are still on the legacy infrastructure and equipment, and other endpoints that are now on the SD-WAN solution. Yep. So I'll take one more question. We had one that came in about what branch applications are enterprises looking to introduce onto CPE that are not networking functions. And Dave and Matt, I'll open that up to you first, and then I'm happy to jump in as well.
Well, I guess Matt's already touched upon that to some extent with the reference to unified communications. I guess really, in essence, to use another sort of idiom, the sky's the limit on all of this. I mean, the kind of model for SD-WAN deployment we're looking at is one that actually provides the future-proofing, the long-term flexibility to roll out, a number of different types of communication services and applications, and to manage all of that in a very simplified, policy-driven way. So I don't think that there is any real need to place any limit on that. I mean, unified communications is obviously a sort of first starting point, but the advantage of a software-centric mode of introducing new services, that really it provides a lot of sort of freedom and capability to create new services, including the customization that Steve referred to, and in fact enterprise's own sort of services as well. So I think really the key point there is the flexibility and the openness to sort of service innovation is what I would sort of flag up.
Yeah, good points. And Matt, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think David's explained things quite well. This service innovation is one of the key things that we have been talking to operators about as a key benefit of this way of doing things. I think it's quite early days in terms of operators innovating their own new services to sit on top of this. I think at this stage we are still going with things like SD-WAN that are quite well recognized, that are being adopted quite widely. But as people get more comfortable with this model, we may see that begin to change.
Exactly, and I think to that point, unfortunately, I can't speak to them by name, but we do have one particular large retail outlet that we've worked with, and then a number of other customers that have done similar things where they've leveraged the universal CPE solution, Matt, as you talked about in your portion of the presentation today. They've used that to virtualize some of their business-specific applications that need to sit out at a particular retail location. And that might be some sort of inventory management software. It might be we've had other customers that we've talked about where it might have to do with the purchase and sales solution, which we talked about earlier. But also we've talked to some partners and other companies about integrating in things like perimeter security. So not network security, but just managing the cameras and the basically door alarms, things like that. All of those applications, instead of having now to sit on a separate server in the branch, could all be sitting on that universal CPE platform, so that you've basically consolidated all of your devices down into one or two. You might have two. When I say two for redundancy, you might have a primary CPE and a secondary CPE just for redundancy. But with that, the applications are now sitting all on those two devices, as opposed to maybe a couple of servers and everything else that would have to be out there. So we are starting to see that transition off of just network services. I think another good example would be an IoT gateway. We've had a couple of even service provider customers reach out about that. So I think, Matt, to your point is, as the industry continues to evolve and as we see SD-WAN deployed, I think we're going to start seeing this open up more and more to a broader array of innovative ideas and solutions. So with that, Caitlin, I'll turn it back to you for our wrap-up and close, because I see that we're beyond the top of the hour.
Thank you so much, Steve and Matt and David. And John, appreciate your time today. We are going to close it out. The replay will be available, and we'll follow up with the slides as well. So thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great rest of your morning or afternoon or evening wherever you are today. Bye-bye.